Generation 4's box legendaries were pretty fantastic when they first came out. Dialga in particular was really excellent, as the #1 Pokemon of Gen 4 Ubers. Dialga was the first ever Dragon Steel type Pokemon, an incredible type combo for the time because this is a time before Fairy existed, and Dialga is a rare Dragon type neutral to Dragon itself. Palkia was no slouch either, as Dragon Water was also an incredible type combination before Fairy came into existence. Palkia is only weak to one type, that being Dragon, and also conveniently has a ×4 resistance to water, making it excellent against Kyogre. Kyogre really relies on the Water-Ice-Electric offensive combination, and Palkia matches up well into all of that and threatens Kyogre with super effective Thunder. Giratina was perhaps the most unique of the 3 Gen 4 box legendaries. A more defensively oriented legendary than the other 2, with a Dragon Ghost typing, incredible defensive stats and options like Will-O-Wisp, Dragon Tail, and good traits to abuse Rest and Sleep Talk with pressure stall strategies. This was a stall-oriented legendary. Giratina is a little bit harder to fit on teams because it only really works on very specific defensive strategies, but this definitely filled shoes that no other legendary filled before. But in the modern day, all 3 of these legendaries have kind of fallen off a cliff in their Ubers viability, with new and exciting legendaries releasing over the years to outclass them all, like Xerneas and Yveltal in Gen 6, Lunala and Necrozma Duskmane in Gen 7, Eternatus in Gen 8, and now Koraidon and Miraidon in Gen 9. Palkia and Dialga feel outdated, and Giratina feels too slow. But there is one other box legendary from Gen 4 I've failed to mention, and this legendary Pokemon has stood the test of time, and it is still viable today, seeing fairly common use even in Gen 9 Ubers. Technically this isn't a Pokemon of its own, it is an alternative form for Giratina. But Giratina-Origin feels different enough to its base form that it may as well be a whole different Pokemon. Out of all these Gen 4 box legendaries, Giratina-Origin has been the most successful, if you factor in the entire franchise. Dialga and Palkia may have had it beat in its debut, and maybe even a little bit after that, but Giratina-Origin held on to viability and remains viable today. I happen to be a big fan of Giratina-Origin. It's probably my favorite of all the Gen 4 box legendaries. I think the visual design is an improvement over the original Giratina with its weird serpentine, bug-like appearance. I really enjoy using this Pokemon in-game. I think it is a positive addition to Uber's metagames wherever it's available. And I think that its enduring viability today is a testament to its great design from the beginning. So let's explore Giratina-Origin and how it was the only Gen 4 box legendary to survive power creep. But first I have urgent breaking news. Iron Mugulis has made a trade offer to the general populace that some believe is a bit controversial. Iron Mugulis is currently offering a price of $1 million for access to the move High Horsepower. I don't know how he got those funds, that's a lot of money, but the offer's on the table if you're interested, if you can provide such a service. I'm just the messenger here, I'm just relaying information to you. You can do with it what you will, and of course the Iron Mugulis plush is still available on makeship.com, be sure to check that out. So what is the difference between Giratina's base form and origin form? Well, as stated in the intro, Giratina in its base form is a very defensively oriented Pokemon. It has a massive 150 base HP and 120 in both of the defensive stats. Compared to other legendaries, its attacking stats are relatively low, only base 100 in both. The ability Pressure is shared among all of the Gen 4 box legendaries, but Giratina is probably the best at abusing it because of these fantastic defensive stats, and the Rest Talk set that it can use. Giratina-Origin, on the other hand, is the more offensively oriented form. It has the same stats as base form Giratina, with one significant difference. The attacking and defensive stats are swapped. You now have 120 base attack and special attack, and 100 in the defenses. Giratina-Origin also needs to be holding the item Gracious Orb to be able to transform into the Origin form. This is a little bit restrictive. It means that you can't use any other item, like leftovers or a berry or anything useful like that, but at least this item is fairly decent on its own merits. This item grants a 1.2x power boost to ghost and dragon type attacks, which are common stab moves that you will be using. Another key difference between Giratina's base and origin form is the ability. Giratina-Origin cannot get pressure, instead it has levitate, a fitting ability since Giratina-Origin appears to be flying in the air. Levitate, of course, grants a complete immunity to ground, and also grants an immunity to effects like spikes, toxic spikes, and sticky web, those entry hazards. And interestingly, this actually makes Giratina-Origin superior defensively in some ways to base form Giratina. You may not have the sheer defensive stats, but an entire type immunity and immunity to spikes and toxic spikes is pretty massive. Levitate is overall a far better ability than pressure, which is a little bit of an unexciting ability, all things considered. It's okay, it's better than nothing, but causing the enemy to consume more PP is generally not that powerful. Levitate has way more direct, immediate application. The superior offensive stats are also kind of a great fit on Giratina because this Pokemon's offensive move pool is vast. You have a plethora of different physical, special, and boosting options. You even have priority in the form of Shadow Sneak. Giratina's base form can use these, but with its measly base 100 attack and special attack, it's not the best at using them. Usually wants to lean more into the defensive sets, like those rest sets. But Giratina-Origin has an absolute ocean's worth of offensive options to take advantage of, and it's no slouch defensively either, with Levitate having its own set of advantages. And plus you still have 150 base HP, that's enormous. 100 base defense and special defense is also not even that bad. So Giratina-Origin kind of gets the best of all worlds. It's a much more functional Pokemon, even in the debut game of Gen 4. Giratina-Origin is the more popular form, because it just does more. It can take advantage of Giratina's toolset better. Levitate gives it more flexibility in hitting the field, and actually makes it a better rapid spin blocker. As a ghost type, you have the privilege of being able to block rapid spin, and Giratina-Origin is probably the best ghost type in Ubers. In fact, in Gen 4, Giratina is the only legendary ghost type, which is a pretty incredible trait to have. And this was before defog existed, so spin blocking is a very important box to tick. So Giratina-Origin is doing a lot for your Gen 4 Ubers team. Shadow Sneak is excellent just for general stab priority, but also because it hits key targets like Mewtwo and Deoxys Attack, and various just low health offensive threats that happen to be in range of it. Draco Meteor is incredible special stab, boosted by Gracious Orb, hitting so many different things for incredible special damage. You have Outrage for dragon type damage on the physical side too. Thunder is fantastic into Kyogre. You even have Earthquake as a way to hit Dialga. Not all dragon types in the game in Gen 4 can hit Dialga, so that's a big deal. I mean, Giratina-Origin is so much better than its base form. It's almost as if this feels like the true version of Giratina. It's way better at taking advantage of all of Giratina's options. It feels like the much more logical way to use this Pokemon. In the very next generation, Gen 5, Arceus, who was previously banned in Gen 4, is now legal to use. And Arceus, of course, has the ability multi-type, meaning it can be any type. So Giratina-Origin has some new competition from another Pokemon that can become a ghost type. Arceus Ghost is one of its most popular forms, and it is another option for a rapid spin blocker. But Giratina-Origin is still the more popular choice for this role because of its access to Levitate, that stab is Shadow Sneak, and even Dragon typing coming in handy for key resistances. The immunity to spikes and toxic spikes is arguably even more important in Gen 5 as we have the introduction of Ferrothorn, who would become an Uber's staple, the new best spikes setter in the metagame. The fact that Giratina-Origin has access to Will-O-Wisp also enhances its usefulness, as Will-O-Wisp is pretty difficult to switch in against. Nothing really loves coming in on this. Fire types are immune, but there's barely any fire types here in this format, and the few status immune Pokemon that can come in on this will be threatened by Giratina-Origin's various attacking options, won't they? Now in the transition from Gen 5 to Gen 6, this is where a lot of formerly viable Dragon-type legendaries like Palkia and Dialga, and even base form Giratina, really fell off a cliff. I mean, this is where the fairy type was introduced and Xerneas was introduced to the game. A little bit of a disaster for many dragons. Dragon is no longer a very spammable type, as you have to worry about the immune fairy types coming in. So for Giratina-Origin, this sounds like bad news, doesn't it? It also doesn't help that Rapid Spin is no longer the only way to remove hazards. Defog exists now, and Defog is a way to remove hazards that can't be blocked by ghost types. So Giratina-Origin's role of blocking Rapid Spin is less important, now that there's a new way to remove hazards that doesn't care what type you are. But Giratina-Origin held on to viability here in this significant jump, where there's Xerneas now, there's an overall nerf to Dragon. There's Megas, there's new and exciting options that are more and more powerful. Giratina-Origin held on, partially because it itself gained defog as an option, enhancing its utility further. And Giratina-Origin is one of the few good defogging legendaries. It's actually a pretty scarce option here. And it really helps that Giratina has Levitate, granting it immunity to the hazards it's aiming to remove. The new top dog of Ubers in Generation 6 and 7 was Primal Groudon, the powerful new form of Groudon with an all-new ground fire typing, way higher stats, the ability to set intense sunlight on the field, which is permanent while it stays on the field, and crucially grants a complete immunity to water. Ground and fire typing seems terrible because its types were weak to water, but Primal Groudon is effectively immune to water. Why is this relevant? Well, it turns out that Giratina-Origin actually has a pretty nice matchup into this new king of Ubers. Think about it. You're immune to ground, that's one of their stab types, and you resist fire, their other stab type. Draco Meteor will hit them hard, and you have Defog, which also removes the hazards they set. Giratina-Origin can remove Stealth Rock from the field as Groudon Primal sets it. You can also choose to run Toxic, which puts them on a clock and applies pressure to them, and that goes very well with Hex, a ghost type attack that doubles in power if the target is statused. It's not as if Primal Groudon has no options to hit Giratina-Origin, but Giratina-Origin is actually one of the few legendaries that can check Primal Groudon effectively. And this is very important in both Gen 6 and 7 Ubers. And it's part of what makes this guy such an effective defogger, because it can actually switch in nicely against this Pokemon, which other defoggers can't really. Thunder Wave is another status option that's really good here because it can punish an incoming Xerneas and a lot of incoming Pokemon, to be honest. Getting paralyzed is a death sentence for many, and this also synergizes well with Hex. Everything that was great about Giratina-Origin in Gen 6 carries over to Gen 7, especially that Primal Groudon matchup. But you also match up fairly well into Necrozma Duskmane. Necrozma Duskmane can threaten you significantly with Steel Stab and Psychic Stab, but it's very nice that you are a ghost type and hit them super effectively. It's also very nice to have access to Shadow Sneak, which is very punishing to Necrozma Ultra after it transforms into the Necrozma Ultra form. You have a way to eliminate them after they go all in on their big Z-move thing, and that is incredibly useful. That is an absolute asset in this format, as Necrozma Ultra is incredibly powerful and common here. A lot changed in Gen 8 Ubers. This was Dexit, a lot was cut. There's no more Primals, there's no more Megas. But Giratina-Origin holds on to viability yet again, in an incredible twist of fate. This is a fundamentally powerful Pokemon that just tends to work well in general. You still wall base form Groudon pretty well. And guess what? There's a new big, powerful guy in town called Calyrex Shadow Rider, one of the most powerful Pokemon in existence. This guy's times 4 weak to Ghost, so Shadow Sneak is once again one of the most valuable assets in history here, as this can actually one-hit KO one of the most powerful threats in the whole format. So that alone is incredibly good, but then you're also still pretty nice into Necrozma Duskmane. You are helping out versus various things. You feel like kind of a half-check to so many things. Will-O-Wisp is always useful. Defog is always useful. They cannot keep Giratina-Origin down, no matter how much new powerful things get added to the game. Giratina-Origin hasn't even been buffed that much either, not much has changed about it. The biggest thing it got was Defog in Gen 6. That's a pretty small buff, all things considered. It's really holding on just out of the sheer merit of its own existence. I made a video about Ho-Oh recently, who is also an incredibly well-aged legendary, but Ho-Oh received significant buffs over the years and benefited from mechanical changes. Giratina-Origin is basically the same as when it came out. and it's just so functional in its base state that it is hanging on to viability against all odds. Truly. What I love about Giratina-Origin as well is that it feels so balanced among all these other legendaries. It doesn't feel overwhelmingly powerful at all. It didn't even feel that way in its debut game. This is like the most balanced, well-designed legendary in history, I would argue, because it just never falls off in viability. It's always adding something to the format and helping respond to everything else. It's worth noting as well that in Gen 8, Giratina-Origin gained an incredible new option, Poltergeist, which is a 110 power physical ghost type attack. Interestingly, this move can only be used if your enemy is holding an item, so sometimes this won't work, but most of the time this is an incredibly powerful and valuable physical ghost stab, which Giratina-Origin didn't have previously. In Generation 9, Giratina-Origin is the most viable of all the Gen 4 box legendaries. Dialga and Palkia are almost never seen, base form Giratina is almost never seen. Palkia and Dialga actually received new Origin forms in Pokemon Legends Arceus, but these aren't the best either. Giratina-Origin remains the king of Gen 4 box legendaries. Part of the reason for that is because it is one of the only legendaries in the whole game that gets defog. I think it might actually be the only one. Yes, this is the only legendary in the game that gets defog, is Giratina and Giratina-Origin. So that's massive. That's a key role you need to fill that only Giratina-Origin can fill. Something that is helpful for Giratina-Origin's continued viability is that Arceus Ground with Dragon Dance is a new foe. Arceus got buffed with the new option of Dragon Dance, and the most popular Arceus form to abuse that is Arceus Ground, as it has, you know, Stab, Earthquake, Stone Edge, which is famously excellent coverage. It's one of the top threats of the metagame. So Giratina-Origin's access to Will-O-Wisp and that ground immunity is coming in handy for the millionth time in a row. I will say Giratina-Origin is having a little bit of a hard time in this generation, as Zacian Crown is now a member of the metagame, and that certainly doesn't bode well. Zacian Crown is very fast and has super effective fairy damage to hit Giratina-Origin with. Koraidon is also speedy and has Dragon Stab to threaten Giratina-Origin. These are the two top threats of the metagame overall, and Giratina-Origin has a poor matchup against them both. But Levitate still gives you plenty of entry points, and when you have an entry point, there's a lot that Giratina-Origin can do, whether it stabilizes against hazards by defogging or spreads status with Will-O-Wisp, or even Dragon Tails to deal with a sweeper or shuffle enemies around to exacerbate a hazard game plan of your own. Giratina-Origin is still amazingly functional after all these years. It is ranked in the B+ tier of Gen 9 Ubers in the most recent viability rankings. And I think that for such an old Pokemon that is mostly unchanged, it got, you know, Defog and Poltergeist, it's mostly unchanged. It's mostly the same guy as it was back at Gen 4. And it's still holding on to a relevant place in the metagame in Gen 9, where power creep has reached an absurd point. It's a little bit unfortunate how much they missed the mark with Palkia and Dialga's new Origin forms. It's interesting that they didn't even give them a new ability. They still just have pressure. The best thing about Giratina-Origin is its new ability, Levitate, so it was a perfect opportunity to breathe some new life into Palkia and Dialga, who have been struggling for a long time to keep up. But they just didn't, unfortunately. Giratina-Origin, on the other hand, is still holding on. And like I said, I think Giratina-Origin is one of the greatest legendary designs in the series. It's not particularly flashy or crazy in what it does, but it is just reliable and consistent, and also not particularly frustrating to play against or overwhelming. It always adds a healthy dynamic to the game. It has a vast selection of different options, but at the same time it doesn't have things like healing or pivoting on item removal or broken stuff like that. It has some great tools, but it's limited in other areas. I think Giratina-Origin enhances Ubers in every generation. It's a beautiful Pokemon. I think it's underappreciated. I don't see it talked about that often. So here's the Giratina-Origin video, the celebration of its existence. Thank you, Giratina-Origin, for your years of service. What do you think about this Pokemon? Do you enjoy it? Who's your favorite of the Gen 4 box legendaries? This is mine, but what about you? Let me know down below in the comments, and thank you for watching.